Hi, I'm Danielle Gagne from Commercial UAV News, and I'm really excited today because we brought this group together to talk about success in the time of COVID-19 and what that has looked like for both Skydio and DroneUp, and to get your perspectives on what our industry can and should be doing to leverage opportunities and plan for the future impact of this arrested year. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge all of your successes. Can you each introduce yourselves and talk about some of the milestones you have reached this year and what that means for your companies and the industry? Let's jump in first with Tom Walker and the DroneUp team.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you to my team and to Grant and Adam and Brendan for joining us on this. This is a real honor. So I am Tom Walker. I'm the founder and CEO of DroneUp. We're a global end-to-end drone services and innovation company. We've been in business since 2016, but I would say the significant growth that we've experienced has been over the last 8 or 9 months, which is interesting in terms of the timing of this conversation. And I'd point out that the expansion that we have has not just been nationally, but it's been internationally. We've actually moved into more countries in the last 6 months than we probably have moved into in the last 2 years, which I think is pretty substantial. In terms of the success that we've had, we have really 4 different divisions, 3 key divisions of the company, but we have our special projects team, we have our drone services and aerial data collection team, then we have an innovation team, and then we have a training group. And what's interesting is that every single one of those groups have set monthly, month-over-month revenue records since COVID has began, so it's not been in a specific area. Training has improved. Our training numbers and growth in the training division has been substantial. Anthony heads up, in addition to operations, our flight team. This month we set a flight record for the most number of flights since the company started. And then obviously in our innovation and special projects team, you're familiar with the projects we're doing with Walmart, with UPS, and with NATO, which have just been very, very substantial. And we've completed phase 1 in each one of those, and now we're moving on to phase 2 and 3. So it's been a good year for us. We feel very blessed and honored, but we're not flying any mission accomplished flags yet. We still have a lot of work left to do. So right now it's focused on doing what we're doing right, because we feel like we're not just carrying the weight of the responsibility of our company and our shareholders and our brand, but I tell my team, like when I left Vegas and the Walmart project out there, I said it only takes one off shit to wipe out 100 attaboys. So and one of those negatives doesn't just impact DroneUp, but it can impact our entire industry. So we feel that responsibility, and we operate with that level of focus on not just doing it and growing, but doing it and doing it right.
Fantastic. Anthony, do you have anything to add about DroneUp?
Sure. So Anthony Vittone, I'm COO of DroneUp. I would say what I'm excited about over the last 6 to 9 months, just to follow on what Tom said, is not only the sales volume, and he's sort of touched on this as well, but is also the breadth of the business. I mean, we're doing high profile projects like the Walmart operation, and then and NATO, which some folks might have seen the press on that last week. I mean, they're very different projects in a way, but they're also very similar, which is just working out last mile delivery. But then we're doing more in terms of the training and then equipment sales, but also just in terms of the core business of services in general. I mean, the breadth of the different projects. And I think some of this has been, maybe the topic that we're going to be discussing, but is related to the COVID and the pandemic, of more and more industries just sort of exploring and accelerating their exploration of drones. And so, there's the typical type services of construction and facility inspections, but I mean, we did some coverage recently to help out a news station to film the Editorial. And then we were doing boat inspections in Scotland last week. So I mean, the breadth of the business is what I'm excited about, and think that is very exciting, not just for DroneUp, but for the industry as a whole.
I agree. That is really exciting. Now I'm going to turn it over to Skydio with Adam Bray. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Danielle. Thanks very much for having us here. It's really an honor to be doing this alongside Tom and Anthony from DroneUp. So I'm a co-founder and CEO of Skydio, and it's been a really exciting year for us. So at the end of last year, we launched Skydio 2, which is our second generation product, which has been really a phenomenal success. The consumer reception for that product has been much stronger than we anticipated. And a lot of our energy and focus has been trying to catch up to demand on the consumer side. So we've been trying to scale up production in the face of COVID, which has definitely been challenging, but the team has done incredible work there. And we are starting to make serious headway. So we're at thousands of drones per month now and chipping away at the backlog there. And then the other thing that happened is Skydio 2 really laid the foundation for our expansion into the enterprise, which had always been part of our long-term vision and is something that we really see happening now. So the most important thing for us, how we think about success is looking at the success of our customers. And on that front, we've had some really exciting milestones this year. So actually just last week, we announced our partnership with EagleView, which we believe is the largest commercial drone deal ever. So they're deploying thousands of Skydio 2s across the country, doing residential roof inspection with our fully automated house scan product, which essentially with a few taps, any operator can fully digitize the roof of any house, which is one of these concepts that people have talked about for a while, but hasn't really existed. So we're very excited to be working with EagleView on that. We've also grown, essentially starting from zero at the beginning of the year to cover 11% of the public safety market. And I think that's one where we're seeing increased adoption and increased interest because of COVID. I mean, I think there's more and more need to be using drones in a responsible way to get useful information for officers while keeping everybody safe. So that's something that we're proud and excited to be doing. We also have a number of DOTs around the country using Skydio 2s for bridge inspection, as well as internationally. So we have partners in Japan that are using Skydio 2s on a daily basis for bridge inspection. So those are a few examples of things where, I think a lot of these things were happening already or probably would have happened already, but things that have accelerated a little bit because of COVID. And then we are also full steam ahead on product development. The engineering team is cranking away either in the office or working from home. And we've had a lot of exciting announcements there. We announced X2, which is kind of the bigger, more robust enterprise bigger brother to Skydio 2. And we have a number of public sector and enterprise customers for that, as well as software products like 3D Scan, which provide autonomous general purpose capture of structures. So it's been a challenging year. I think any company that's being honest about it knows that COVID brings new challenges for operating, and you have to adapt and do things in new ways. But it's also been a really exciting one for us. And the last piece of this, which I think is helpful for us in supporting our customers, is that in the middle of COVID, we actually announced our $100 million Series C, which is a big milestone for us in terms of having the cash and resources to keep the gas pedal down on product development and getting our product out there in customers' hands.
Congratulations on everything. Brendan, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure, thanks, Danielle. So on the regulatory and policy front, and I'm Brendan Groves, I lead our regulatory and policy efforts at Skydio. We've been laser focused on unlocking the utility of drones, especially autonomous drones that fly themselves. And we've set our sights on breaking down some of the barriers that have traditionally tied the hands of drone operators here in the United States. That's the need to fly beyond visual line of sight reliably, repeatedly, and at scale without traditional impediments, things like visual observers and $100,000 radar packages that generally don't make sense for most of the BVLOS operations we're seeing conducted today around the country. So we've been able to do that actually, first for public aircraft operators, first responders, state DOT. Earlier this year, most folks listening may have heard about the FAA's announcement that every public aircraft operator can now conduct tactical beyond visual line of sight operations, flying 50 feet above or around structures within 1,500 feet of the operator. And you don't need visual observers. You don't need expensive and unwieldy surveillance technology. And that waiver rests on the back of the safety case that Skydio developed and led with our partners in the Chula Vista Police Department as a member of the San Diego IPP. We were really thrilled, honestly, after the FAA not only granted our waiver for Chula Vista, but enabled every single public safety agency or public aircraft operator of any type to enjoy those same new frontiers, I suppose, under the Part 107 context, and that's the regulation that governs commercial operations here in the United States. We have broken down the same barriers. Actually, just today, we are announcing in partnership with North Carolina Department of Transportation a groundbreaking waiver that allows North Carolina DOT to autonomously inspect thousands of bridges arrayed across the state without the traditional impediments to beyond visual line of sight flight. There's no requirement to leverage visual observers. There's no requirement to leverage surveillance technology. And this is really a marker of things to come. And I think the entire industry will find a great deal of hope in regulatory breakthroughs like that bring the efficiency and the scalability of unmanned aircraft operations closer than ever before.
Absolutely. It benefits the entire industry. And last but not least, Grant Guillot, can you tell us a little bit about how the whole industry seems to be doing in terms of success? You work with a number of clients across the ecosystem.
Yeah, Danielle, thank you. It's great to be here. Grant Guillot, I am a partner and the UAS team leader at the law firm Adams and Reese. I also host a weekly podcast for a company called Market Scale. It's called Drones in America. And it's in that capacity that I'm here today because while I'll briefly talk about some of the developments in my practice, we're really here today to celebrate the industry and what's going on in the industry. I guess real quickly, I'll state that what I've noticed, at least in my practice, is a exponential interest in drone deliveries since April, well, probably since February actually. But in April, the FAA posted or put out some notice that it wanted companies to utilize the existing regulatory framework to fully maximize drone operations to assist with COVID-19 relief efforts. What I've seen in the recent months is the FAA has stood by that, and they have really worked with companies, whether through granting waivers or through doing exactly what they said in the notice, enabling operations under Part 107 to take part in COVID-19 relief efforts. The FAA really has stepped up to the plate over the past few months, and that's just a quick development I wanted to say about my practice. Part 135 is more popular than ever. We also see companies like DroneUp that are operating under Part 107 and showing their ways to scale using Part 107 that traditionally were kind of not frowned upon, but doubted. There used to be this assumption that you couldn't scale under Part 107 because you cannot fly beyond the line of sight or across state lines, but DroneUp's kind of changing that narrative, which is great. And so narrative is the key word here. And really, Danielle, when you and I talked about putting this program together, it's in my capacity as the host of Drones in America. Every week I'm talking with government leaders and companies in this industry. And two that have really stood out through this entire mess, through this coronavirus, pandemic are DroneUp and Skydio. In a time when it seemed like we were struggling for weeks at a time to get a positive news story out there about drones, you saw positive stories about DroneUp and Skydio over the past few months. And I'm sure COVID-19 certainly does have something to do with that. The industry overall itself has been able to rise to the occasion and thrive during this pandemic. But these two companies in particular are names that keep coming up. We keep seeing stories, and they keep innovating and pushing the envelope, which is why it's really important as an industry that we celebrate these two companies, but also that we see what lessons we can learn from them as an industry to move forward, because these two companies certainly are doing that.
Absolutely, and it's an honor to be able to pick all of your brains about this past year and the success you've had. But before we go much further, I'd like to ask each of you, has your definition of success kind of changed as a result of COVID-19 and its impact on our economy? Let's start off with Skydio.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that for us, a lot of of dealing with COVID has also coincided with our expansion into the enterprise. And I think that those two things together have really been an opportunity to clarify what we're about. So, I think we've always had this vision of drones out there doing useful work for people. And as we've expanded into the enterprise, as we have public safety inspectors, all kinds of folks using our products, I think we've gotten more focused on what does that actually mean? What is it about? And very simply for us, our mission is to make the world more productive, creative, and safe with autonomous flight. We see this as the beginning of a whole new category of device with the potential for enormous impact. And it's exciting for us to see that now taking hold in the world. I mean, we have consumers creating all kinds of amazing content on a daily basis with Skydio 2s. And we have folks doing these really challenging tasks that usually require putting a person in harm's way or using heavy, expensive machinery. And I think drones are just one of these really amazing new technologies that offer the potential of doing things, 10x better and 100x safer and a fraction of the cost. So that potential has always been there, and I think people have recognized it. But what we see happening now is it really living into that potential, and there's customers across almost every industry segment that are actually using and benefiting from drones. And obviously we think autonomy is a big part of that, like being able to trust the drone to fly itself is just a huge enabler. So, I don't think that COVID has fundamentally changed our mission or what we're about as a company, but I do think it's provided an opportunity and a need to think more about it and get clarity on it.
Tom, how about you? Has your definition of success changed as a result of COVID-19?
Well, first, I want to say congratulations to Adam and Brendan for all your success and listening to you guys talk about all the things you've accomplished. That makes me feel good. And so sincere congratulations to you. And it's an honor to be on this panel with you. And I'll tell you why is one of the things that I tell my team all the time is we're a new industry. Everything matters. Our accomplishments matter. Our mistakes matter. And to the point of what Brendan was saying earlier, we are all doing the same thing. We're not trying to break the rules. We're not trying to bend the rules, but we're exploring the capabilities of what we can do within the constraints of those rules until new regulatory policies are in place that enable us to do beyond that. And so I tell my team, we think about everything we do in this order: what is best for our industry, what is best for our brand, and lastly, what's best for our shareholders. And that's a little bit of a switch, I think, in the way a lot of companies approach things, but I think our industry demands it. And so the answer to your question is, has my definition of success changed? No, not at all. But as environmental conditions and situations on the ground changes, success is a place you're going. And what I would say, COVID and everything that's happened in our industry may have changed which road and which path and which alleyway I might have taken to get to there. But I would say that ultimately what we define as success is that at the end of the day, our brand is strong, we've made our industry better, and we've returned to our shareholders. And so I would say in that particular case, the definition hasn't changed, just the path in which we may get there has been altered a bit.
Excellent point. Grant, how about you? Any changes?
I don't know if I would say there's a change in how I've defined success, but I think there are two areas of success. This time a year ago, we were all still very concerned, still are, about public perception. But these two companies, when we talk about success, one thing I want to highlight for each of them. DroneUp, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is the ability to move away from this perception that you can't do anything under Part 107. For a long time, there was a lot of frustrations. The FAA wasn't granting waivers fast enough. It's a common criticism you would hear. The FAA is not supporting us. And that's not all companies who are saying that, but you did hear some negativity. And as I said a minute ago, the FAA certainly has proven that is anything but the case this year with how supportive they've been of this industry. But aside from that, DroneUp has shown that under Part 107, you can scale deliveries. And I think that is something that's very important because when we think of deliveries, we often think flying from house to house. And oftentimes you're not necessarily going beyond line of sight. And oftentimes you're not going across state lines. So showing that as an industry, a company is able to scale within the confines of Part 107, even without a waiver, I think is important. And it's a level of success, or an element of success, that I think is a great thing DroneUp has established this year. Skydio, I would say, at a time when, you know, we have two presidential candidates, both who are stressing the importance of American-made goods, American jobs. There's a common sentiment in this country, I believe, to really want to support America and American-made machinery, American jobs. And Skydio has really carved itself out as the American drone company. They have shown we don't necessarily need to use Chinese or foreign source products to implement scalable drone operations. And I think that's critical, because I'm not going to get political, and I'm not going to say whether the opinion of foreign source drones is warranted or not. Rather, what I'm going to say is that opinion is there. That concern is there, right or wrong. And Skydio has risen to the occasion and really put itself out there as made in America. You know, we are homegrown, and we want people to understand this is important not only to our pockets and our wallets, but it's important to our country. It's important to show that as Americans, we can succeed in drone manufacturing. So I think those are two areas of success. The definition hadn't necessarily changed, but it's two prominent successes that have taken place this year.
Absolutely. And the fact that we're bringing in some homegrown drone development that can stand up against other established drone companies only works to enrich the entire drone ecosystem, regardless of what you may think about that particular situation. So how has the way of doing business changed for you as a result of COVID-19? Were there any critical decisions or pivots? Speaking, maybe I can kick this over to Tom, since you did talk about going a new path or pivots you had to make to get to your end goals.
You know, I think the only thing that I would say is that our focus as a company, and I'm sure Adam would agree with this, our core focus is we wanted to be the #1 drone service provider in the world. I mean, that's been our mission. And the path in which you do that is really defined by what drone services are in demand at any given time. And you have to be willing to either say, I'm going to stay on this particular path and I'm going to ignore that, or you have to make critical decisions at the time. And I tell people, you know, this morning in a conversation, 10 months ago, we weren't having a conversation about delivery. We weren't. It was not on our agenda. It was not in our mission heading. And now 10 months later, we're doing deliveries for NATO, we're doing deliveries for Walmart, and we're doing deliveries for, you know, another logistics company. And so I would say, is that a pivot? You know, I guess some people might call it a pivot, but it was, as Grant mentioned, it was a demand that was accelerated and amplified because of COVID, that we just felt, because of the technology that we had and because of the depth of our bench in terms of being able to provide talented pilots, that we should step up to the plate and meet. But I would say that our core mission objective of being that leader in drone services has not changed, but certainly some of the focus areas have shifted, and certainly perhaps because of COVID.
Yeah. Danielle, can I follow on to what Tom said? So, I mean, I think the other thing that's changed is it's not just changed our business and accelerated it, but it's also changed the businesses of our clients. I mean, companies that were thinking of, you know, sort of dipping their toes into getting into drones and maybe thinking about using a drone in their workflow. Now, after a result of COVID, they greatly accelerated that. I mean, Walmart is one example of that. NATO is an example of that, who was just like, we have to start working this out. But we have other more to, you know, what I would, you know, more, I don't want to say run-of-the-mill clients, but whatever, regular type clients, you know, facilities inspections and real estate companies that, you know, they were sort of thinking of getting into drones, but now after COVID, it was like, I can put people on a plane and go out there and take a look at these real estate assets that I have, or I can just hire a drone company to go in and provide all of the imagery that I need, and all of my people can stay safely at home and nobody has to be exposed. I mean, I think it's really started to amplify it, both for companies that are in the drone business, but then also companies that are wanting to utilize this technology of how do I do my business better, safer, cheaper for everybody.
Excellent point. It's caused the industries that drone technology has been serving to re-examine the place of drones within their own workflow and systems. So I'm going to kick it over to Skydio. What are your thoughts on this?
So I don't think our way of business has fundamentally changed. I would say that we're having to find a lot of new ways to do things that we used to do differently. And I'd also say, before I get into, I mean, I really have enormous respect for what Tom and the team at DroneUp are doing. I mean, I think a lot of these, like he's kind of downplaying it, but a lot of these in the field operational things and international expansion, I mean, I think these are some of the most difficult things to do in this new world where travel is restricted and you have to maintain social distancing. And these are things that, we've run into challenges on as well. So I would say one of the big adjustments for us is very much just internal ways of operating. I'm a big believer in having a really strong team all under one roof, where we've got hardware engineers and software engineers and marketing folks and product managers, and everybody's, working together and bumping into each other around lunch and having conversations where information is getting shared. And I think that really tight hardware software integration is a big part of what makes our product special. And I think a lot of that comes from having a tightly integrated, cohesive team that's working together, and that's much harder with folks working from home. So we've tried to find ways to kind of simulate that a little bit with various kinds of getting a few people together at the right times. The hardware team has really done a phenomenal job of pushing forward on product development. Like we discovered pretty quickly that a lot of our hardware engineers happen to have huge home lab setups, which I guess is not super surprising because they're passionate about building stuff. But we have folks with big home workshops and giant 3D printers, and all that stuff is in heavy use now. So it's been fun watching the team adapt. Manufacturing has also had to change a lot, and unfortunately, this has resulted in us falling behind some consumer deliveries, which has been a major challenge. But we have mostly figured it out now. Like we build all our drones ourselves at our headquarters in Redwood City, and we've rearranged that line to set it up so that people can still come in and maintain social distancing and do everything in a safe way. And we're actually expanding to another facility elsewhere in the U.S., which will allow us to increase capacity further. So that's been challenging, and it's really thanks to a super strong and dedicated team that we've been able to pull these things off. So those are I think a few examples of us having to adapt to new ways of doing things. Then the other big one is getting to spend time in the field with customers, which I think is some of the most important, rewarding stuff that we do. And unfortunately, that's been harder as well. Although we've still done it because I think it's so important for the success of our company.
Absolutely. The challenge of not being able to demonstrate and see things in the field can make a huge difference between somebody going with a platform or not. And you make a really good point that remote workforce, especially when you're working on hardware, I can only imagine the challenges of putting all that together. And yep. The luck that your team actually had all this stuff at home. I mean, that's just fantastic, and it's shown what that can actually mean, and you can still move forward in spite of all of that.
Yeah, we had some great, like when we were bringing up X2, our next generation product, we had some great, like, one person would build one subassembly and then like drive it over to somebody else's house and like leave it on their front porch. That person would pick it up, do the next step, and then connect it to the internet, and the software engineer would log into that vehicle and configure the code. So it was really like a fun example of distributed teamwork.
Wow, that's incredible. Moving on to the next question. So in the short term, do you think we need to redefine what success looks like, especially in terms of budgeting and when to expect return on investment?
I mean, I think that the reality of business, especially business on the forefront of new technology, is that there's always just a lot of change and a lot of new variables in play constantly. The new technology can come out that changes the way the market works. New competitor can arise that changes the way the market works. And some, very unexpected external thing like COVID can come up, which changes market dynamics. And it, changes financial, at the macro level, it changes the behavior of the financial markets, which all of us are affected by in some form. And it, changes the behavior of customers. So I just look at this as sort of another example of that, where I think it's, it's increased uncertainty. I would say it's like, at least from my perspective, I think it's just harder to predict what the world is going to look like in 3 months or 6 months or a year than it felt like it was a year ago. And so I think it's prudent to manage a company from that perspective. But I also think that being, this is sort of the classic investment thing, but I think that when everybody else is getting conservative, if you're intelligently focused and aggressive in the right areas, you can gain advantage that way. And so, we're certainly not taking the approach of like throwing on the brakes and stopping everything, because we see real opportunity out there with customers. We're seeing a lot of growth right now, and we've chosen to pretty aggressively lean into that in the areas where we think it makes sense.
I'll just say this, and then I'll turn it over to the guy who has responsibility for managing our checkbook. I think that there's a lot of common threads as I listen to Adam and Brendan, and we're the same way. I mean, we were very fortunate to be in a position where we were able to not only continue to invest at the rate we were investing, but actually accelerate that. We took every penny that we weren't able to spend going to marketing and conventions, and rather than pulling that back into the budget, we retargeted that to another investment. And Brendan hit on Adam hit on an important point I want to come back to, and that is, this industry has never really gotten out of the chaotic stage. And I would say that we were chaotic, and then the pandemic created more chaos. And managing through chaos is a special talent. And it takes not only a good team, not only good leadership, but it takes a good relationship with your investors who are willing to say there's a lot going on and we're seeing all this, but we trust you and what you're doing. And companies who have that combination of a good staff and good leadership and good investors and a good product, right? I mean, a good product can really take advantage of these chaotic times. And I think you're seeing certain companies who were capable of doing it. And I would even argue that maybe Adam and his team have faced challenges that we haven't, because I wasn't having to shut down manufacturing and production, and that is obviously has a huge impact. That's a challenge we didn't have to deal with, so I admire that. But I would say that we've, and I think Anthony would confirm this, that I think we've increased our investment by multiples during the pandemic rather than kind of getting too conservative. And I think that's a mistake some companies may have made. I don't know. We won't know until it's over, but we certainly haven't. We haven't done that. And we may turn out we made the mistake. Who knows? I hope that's not the case. But if we made it, then Adam and his team made it. So we're all in the same boat together.
Yeah, I'll just follow on that. Yeah, as the guy who has to keep the checkbook flowing, I sometimes have a different perspective when things come in on projects. But I mean, I think, the industry is developing so much, and the business is developing so much that it's I don't think it's redefining success in the long run, but I mean, I think one of the things that we are always focused on is that making sure that the client is happy with where their project is going, because that's what's going to long term develop benefits for all of us, for them, for the industry, for us as well. And is the scalability of those operations and being able to continually deliver that service. I mean, in all candor, I mean, we worked a good bit with a client a few months ago that we basically backed away from, for the sole purpose that did not see that it was going to be a scalable operation in the end of the day, and that was not, going to be a successful outcome for them, for us, for anybody. So we backed away from it. But so we look to make sure that the projects that we work on, the high profile projects that we've all talked about, and also the other projects that don't really make the news, but that the client is going to be happy with that project in the end, is pleased that they brought drones into the equation, and that operation can be done for them, in a way that is helpful for them and that is profitable for us.
Danielle, I'll add that in terms of redefining success, from when I started becoming involved in drone matters and drone law and representing clients in this industry, there were two huge impediments, both of which still exist today. One, of course, public perception, which we talked about a minute ago. The other one, regulations. Those two impediments, and there's others, but those are the two biggies in my book. They're still there. I would say I was not expecting what I saw in terms of how greatly the public perception of drones has improved since COVID-19. We still have a long way to go. We do, and that's true. But at the same time, I mean, if you look at DroneUp, when they began delivering COVID-19 tests in North Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, there's a video of the first resident to receive it, and he's thrilled. He thinks it's the coolest thing. And DroneUp has just received so much positivity from the community. And I really think we all were kind of going into expanding drone operations being really fearful of the effect or the opinions the public would form on drones. Again, this kind of ties into Skydio. It helps when you are marketing and promoting an American-made product because people are proud. Again, they're proud to be using American products. But nevertheless, this was a major concern in the industry, and it still is. But we've seen some great strides being made in public perception, I would say, since February. There are those who adamantly disagree with me on this, but I mean, it's my opinion. Public perception has improved, which brings us to major obstacle number 2, and that's the regulatory environment. And I'm curious to know what Brendan thinks about this as well, because Brendan, of course, is also an attorney, as is Anthony. And to me, what I'm curious to see is how the improvement in public perception is going to positively impact the regulatory environment. For years, we've been hearing the FAA stress the importance of public perception and the effects that'll have on the regulations of drones. We are in a year where by the end of this year, we supposedly will be seeing a remote ID rule and an ops over people and during nighttime rule. I'm curious to see how this relationship between public perception and regulations will ultimately play out, because I wonder if, in fact, we may have also accelerated regulatory development as well. And Brendan, I know I'm not the host, but Brendan, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Grant, it's an interesting idea. I do think those two have an important relationship that's probably under notice. So if you read the regulatory rules, you won't find a clause on, and there must be public perception to support this potential operation. It's not there. But, and I know this because for the last 4 years, I sat on the senior interagency body that oversees the integration of drones into the airspace called the FAA-UAS Executive Committee. That is always something that the FAA considers before they grant a waiver. They may not tell you about it, but they're always thinking about it. They're talking about it behind your back. Will the community support the operation you're proposing to perform? And unless they're confident of that, you're very unlikely to see anyone at FAA headquarters sign their name on the dotted line. You know, when you sign a waiver at the FAA, you don't get a gold star. No one increases your paycheck. They don't say, wow, you did such a great job, you let this advanced operation happen. What often happens is you get approbation and discredited if something goes wrong. If local residents are up in arms because they feel that their privacy was violated or the operation's too noisy. That's what the FAA is used to doing. So the more that we as an industry can build public support for these operations, the more likely our friends and colleagues at the FAA are to actually have the guts to put their name on these lines. And I do agree with what Grant said earlier. They have actually leaned forward in enabling these operations. And I do think the benefits that we've seen over the last 9 months, increased public perception, thanks in part to folks like DroneUp, who are actually doing this in communities at scale in our operations with our commercial partners across the country. That's going to make a difference in the long run.
Absolutely. And Grant, you kind of preempted one of the questions I had today, so I'm just going to jump right into it and maybe get DroneUp's opinion on it. Public perception is a huge key to unlocking the demand for drone services, and this has been a pretty big challenge, not only in terms of regulation, but also just getting that demand, people wanting it. First, has COVID-19 on the whole improved or negatively impacted that perception? And second, are there better ways we can be promoting the good things that drones do to really take advantage of those positive stories, especially that are happening now, to build that public support and demand for services?
I would say that, so first off, and I think I've said this in the past or recently, the feedback and the reception that we are getting in the community, not just with the COVID test kit deliveries, but in general, has significantly improved in the last 6 to 9 months. And I would almost use the word dramatically. Do I think that is because of COVID? I don't, but I think it's how we've responded to COVID, and we've done some smart things. So COVID has created, I used to tell people 9 months ago, you had a better chance of getting hit by a stray golf ball sitting in your bathroom than you did the media running a positive story about drones. Every story was negative. And what I think COVID did for our industry is it finally, I think, I don't want to say forced, but encouraged the media to start talking about some of the positive things. And we stayed away from things that we felt like we didn't want to get into surveillance, because now all of a sudden it was surveillance, crowd control, that had just too much potential for negative connotations. So we focused our company on things that we knew would translate positively in the media. Delivery, medication delivery, support, search and rescue, things that we knew would translate positively. And Adam said it earlier, or maybe it was Brendan, that meanwhile we're over here doing inspections and cell tower inspections, and we're doing all that, but that didn't have an impact on the public. And the media has done a good job, I think, of in focusing on that. There's still occasionally a negative story, but by and large, the media has helped change that perception. So if you ask me, did COVID create the change in perception? No, but COVID certainly created a need. The media needed stories. I mean, there was a period of time where everything was bad. They needed something positive. Thankfully, they picked up and ran some positive stories. So I give them credit both for previous bad reputation and perhaps now somewhat of an altered and improved narrative.
Absolutely. The mass media does play a huge impact in how the public perceives all of this, and they understand this industry, because that's how you disseminate information across vast amounts of people. If you do it in a vacuum, only those people know how it's working and what it's doing for you. But being able to amplify that is a very important aspect of the industry. So I'm glad you brought that up. Any other thoughts on this question before we move forward?
Just a couple of quick thoughts, Danielle, from Skydio's lens. I definitely second everything that Tom said, but just add a couple of points. I think it's important for us to recognize sort of two things. One is that we in the industry have an obligation to come together and promote the responsible use of drones. I mean, DroneUp definitely does this stand-up example of what commercial operations should look like. But companies should do whatever they can in all of their interactions with customers to ensure that drones are used in a way that builds public trust. At Skydio, we've done that in a couple of respects. One, earlier this summer, we released what we think is the first of a kind set of ethical and policy principles that are designed to promote responsible use in all of our customer interactions, everything we do in a company. It's something called the Skydio Engagement and Responsible Use Principles. We think we're the first drone company to do that globally, and it includes core concepts like thinking about, as a company, the holistic impact that our products will have on communities and even on countries. It also includes a commitment to develop and deploy artificial intelligence in a responsible and ethical way, and a commitment even deeper than that to promote responsible use in all of our customer engagements. And that includes commercial customers to public safety customers, and other governmental customers. That's something that we take really seriously at Skydio, and we're proud to sort of share that perspective on the world with the broader industry and with governments who really appreciate companies taking responsibility to get this right. And the second thing I would say that has a lot to do with public safety is actually autonomy. We think that autonomy is key to enhancing public safety, or enhancing rather public perception of drones. You know, part of the reason the public doesn't necessarily trust drones quite yet is because most drones are manually flown and they're not that hard to crash. They generally require expert pilots, and autonomy can help to shift that calculus. Once the public begins to trust that the drone inspecting their roof or inspecting the bridge on their local commute is exceedingly unlikely to crash because it's flying itself with next generation artificial intelligence, then drones really become pieces of infrastructure. They become teammates. They become something you see but you don't worry about. So we do think that autonomy is a critical lever in enhancing public perception both here and around the world.
Danielle, I just want to add, and kind of echoing what Brendan said. Brendan and Tom both brought up the importance of earning public trust, and Brendan also brought up government, showing government what drones can do, how drones can be positive. I think this is a critical point. I think you have at least three levels of government that you usually have to work with in any given operation. In working with the FAA, I can tell you, not just on 107 matters, but on 135 matters as well, having that relationship with them and assuring them that you've done your homework and that you have begun to engage the community is such a critical step. As Brendan said, it's almost a non-starter if you approach them and you haven't even given a thought to local engagement. The second thing I'll also say is engaging with state and local lawmakers and regulatory agencies is so critical as well. As some of my clients have come to find out, getting past the FAA is step one. Step two, though, comes in when you actually undertake the operations and you have state and local agencies that are not familiar with drones and don't truly understand how safe they are and how the company has their ducks in a row. It's really important as an industry that we all work together to get this message across, especially to our state and local government decision makers as well. Because if something goes wrong with your drone operation, which is the first level of government that's going to be involved? The local, right? And so it's critical for them to understand what you're doing, that what you're doing is legal, that what you're doing is safe, that you vetted it, and I think perhaps most importantly that you've engaged the community and that you have the community support. I think all those together are the key ingredients for a scalable drone program.
Excellent points. Local and state governments and the community in which you're going to be working on has to understand what you're doing and the value of it in order to get that necessary support. That kind of wraps up our conversation today. At the very end, I'd like to ask everyone if there are any final thoughts.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Danielle, you've done a great job as always, and it's an honor to be talking with DroneUp and Skydio about their successes. Like I said, every week I'm talking with people in this industry at different levels, and these are two names that continue to come up in a positive context, and that's a great thing to see when there's the potential for so much negativity, to have these two big names in the industry continuing to do great work. So thank you to all four of you for that.
And I second that. Thank you. It's been an honor to speak with everyone today and to get your valuable insights on how to run a successful drone company.
Thank you, Danielle. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Everybody.